Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Ghost Biker Garage. I'm your host, the Ghost Biker, and it's Thursday night, and I have another great guest for you guys. We're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to come on, and then I'm going to introduce tonight's guest. But I wanted to take a few minutes and wish everyone happy April, and hope you had a great week. I know we're here in the middle of a cold April 1st, having a dogwood winter here in East Tennessee. But we had a great weekend last weekend. I want to talk just a few minutes about that. We were supposed to have an event there at the Scream Chamber in Athens, Tennessee, but due to the severe weather that we had, we ended up having to cancel that. But the dates have been rescheduled. So it's not a cancellation, it's just a postponement. The dates are going to be June 4th and 5th. So we'll be having more information about that coming up soon. So since that was canceled, I ended up getting to spend a little extra time at an event that was last weekend, honoring a colleague and fellow paranormal investigator, Doyle Goss, and that was at the Old South Pittsburgh Hospital Paranormal Research Center. And so Southern Paranormal, they got this event together, Donald and Rebecca Martin, and had a bunch of paranormal investigators come together. And we did a celebration of Doyle Goss's life. So I know a lot of you guys knew him and have been to their locations there in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. And so we had some pictures and that sort of thing, but a lot of different teams came together: Fallen Shadows, Backroads Paranormal, Soul Sisters Paranormal, Southern Paranormal, Ghost Biker Explorations, and Fox Family Paranormal all came together to celebrate Doyle's life. So, it was a great event for, Para-Unity, and really just coming together. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. We're going to get to the guest here in a second, but I want to say hello to Janet and Peppy, Chris Sumner. You guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead, introduce our guest, and get him on here because we've got a lot of really cool things to talk about tonight. We're going to be sharing some interesting paranormal stories from mine and his home state of Tennessee. My guest tonight is Eric Freeman Sims, and he had his first paranormal experience at the age of 8 and started investigating and researching the paranormal as a teenager. He's been an EMT for 14 years and has encountered some high strangeness and paranormal while working in the medical field. He also started the Unsee Paranormal podcast in July of 2020 and continued to investigate and research all aspects of the paranormal, supernatural, and high strangeness through his podcast, as well as hosting paranormal events and investigations. Like I said, there's a whole lot more to him and a whole lot of stories that we're going to tell. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Eric on.
Hey, Eric. Everybody. Hey, Miranda.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you this evening?
Doing great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk a little bit about how you got started in the paranormal.
So my first experience, I remember, I've kind of had things go on throughout my entire life, but I remember when I was 8 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night, out of a dead sleep, sat up in the bed, and always slept with my bedroom door open. What was open, and there was this full body glowing figure standing in the door. And as an 8-year-old, it scared me. So I jumped up, turned the light on, slammed the door. And hey, Chris. And from then on, I've just experienced lots of paranormal stuff. And that kind of got the ball rolling, me being interested in the paranormal stuff. I loved horror movies as a kid as well. And I was raised by my grandparents. So they were kind of elderly. And unfortunately, my grandfather passed away when I was 14 in 97. So that kind of just drove me more to try to understand death and where we go and what happens. And so as a teenager, I got into, and I don't condone trespassing or sneaking into places. By all means, there's plenty of places you can get permission nowadays. This was back in the 90s before all the ghost shows and ghost hunting and investigating was a big thing. But with some of my friends who were also curious, we gathered what we had, like an old camcorder and tape recorder, and we kind of snuck in some places when I was a teenager and had lots of experiences. And so that just kind of, fueled more and more. And then as I got older, I actually started going and investigating, doing professional investigations, and I've researched the paranormal for as long as I can remember, and just kind of taken in every book and everything that I could possibly get on the paranormal to try to understand just all different aspects of it.
Yeah, and so you were a member of a team that kind of had a really cool concept as far as what you're all. I mean, it really it kind of mirrored the job that you had as an EMT. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Now I'm just a guest investigator for them. I kind of step back because I'm doing the podcast and I'm really busy with that and other things in life. But I was a member of Medics for Paranormal, Medics the number 4 Paranormal, and I'm really good friends. I met both of them, Lee and Paula, working on the ambulance. Paula was actually my supervisor, and me and her. There's Paula right there.
There she is.
Paula. Paula's part of Medics for Paranormal. And me and Paula met while working on the ambulance. She was my supervisor, and I ended up getting 24-hour shifts with her. And so we just kind of, one of the things we connected with was paranormal and investigating. And she had been part of a team that had gone to Octagon Hall and all these places. And so we used to talk about paranormal all the time. And then I also met Lee, partnering up with him on the ambulance at one time, and we all worked together. So we, when they started Medics for Paranormal, I had them on my podcast, and they asked me to be a part of Medics for Paranormal. And so I went, and I'm still a guest investigator. I don't go on all the investigation with them. They like to focus a lot more on like the private investigations. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they call and ask my advice. Sometimes I go, help them out. But yeah, we just did an event for first responders at Thomas House.
Very cool.
And it was a bunch of us medics. So that's always a good time telling stories, and they got to see, what we do as far as paranormal. We have another one coming up in June that's just for first responders. So something to kind of break up and try to, because it's really, really, thank you, Paula. That's sweet. It's a really stressful job, and especially with Corona, it's been really stressful. So Paula and Lee came up with this first responders event for us to just take first responders kind of as a stress reliever for mm-hmm. them. And so we took a small group back about a month ago, and in June we're taking like even a larger group because the word is spread. And so, so that's fun. It's nice to give back to the first responders too. I was an EMT for 14 years, like you said. I'm kind of retired now. I worked in medicine for 20 years in different capacities, and in the past 14, I've been an EMT. Excuse me, I got allergies and sinus stuff going on. But yeah, I had a lot of experiences as a medic on the ambulance. Even before working, I started out as a nurse tech, working in a nursing home. And I worked at a nursing home in Dixon, Tennessee. And the part of the building I worked in, it was an Alzheimer's lockdown unit. Mm. And that part of the building was built back in the 1930s, early 40s, mm-hmm. and had always been a nursing home. So there's no telling how many people, pass away there. Mm-hmm. And I started there when I was 18, and I worked night shift. And in this part of the building, there was only 3 of us. There was me, another nurse tech, and then the nurse. And we were kind of cut off by the physical therapy and a bunch of offices for the rest of the building. And then since we were a lockdown unit, the doors were always locked. Mm-hmm. And we had lots of weird things happen on that end of the building.
I'm sure.
One of the probably most interesting things I've ever had happen to me happened there. The nurse and the other tech were on lunch, and this is middle of the night, like 3:00 in the morning. All the patients are in bed, lights are off, except for a couple of hallway lights. It looks like one of those creepy horror movies that you see in the hospitals with just one light on, Mm-hmm. And everything's quiet and kind of just hanging out, making sure everything's good while they're on lunch. And I went to this T in the hallway, and I looked to my left, and at the end of the hallway, I saw this tall, skinny, young guy in a black suit standing at the end of the hallway. And I'm like, what in the world? Nobody should be here. It's 3:00 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. Nobody should be here. And so he smiled at me and turned to his left and walked into the patient room. And these rooms are ward rooms. So you have 4 patients. There's 2 patients on each side of the room. And then in the middle, there's a bathroom with a nightlight. So I immediately walked down there because I'm like, who's in the building? Mm-hmm. And I'd never seen this guy before. And so I go in that room, turn on the light. There's nobody there, just the 4 patients in the bed.
Wow.
So my shift was over at 7:00 that next morning. And I told the nurse and the tech what I saw, and they're like, we've seen stuff like that. Like, it's crazy. So my shift was over at 7:00 the next morning. So I leave and I come back the next night for my shift, and one of those patients in there passed away an hour after I left in that same room.
Wow.
So
Okay.
so the only thing that I've ever come up with to call that was the angel of death. And it wasn't anything, he wasn't scary. He smiled at me, and there was no eerie feeling. I walked straight down there. It looked just like a, solid person like me and you. And he just was really tall, really skinny, and in a black suit. And a patient in that room passed away.
That really gave me cold chills when you started describing him, and before you had said that the patient had passed away. I got these cold chills, and that's so he looked just like a normal person.
Yeah, and he was probably like mid-20s. I mean, looking like a younger looking guy. And
wow.
and I, there was only a couple of lights on down that hallway, so I couldn't see a lot of detail, but he just looked like a normal person. That's why I walked down there, because I'm like, who's in the building? Because we're in a lockdown. You have to put a code in to get in or out any of the doors. And so I'm just like, there shouldn't have any visitors. There's no doctors here. There's no, it's just me on the hall at that point, because the other 2 are at lunch. So yeah, that's one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. That was when I was 18 or 19. And then I've experienced various other things throughout my medical career. Just seeing things from like people who should have died and didn't, like in car wrecks, really, bad car wrecks, stuff like that there's not maybe a scratch or a bruise on them. And then other people who have a 10-mile-an-hour wreck and it kills them, so just weird, interesting things like that. Like, okay, well, some of these people, I hate to say they were meant to die, but it was their time to go, and kind of got me believing, okay, well, maybe there is a plan for us. I don't know, So yeah, that's interesting. I had lots of other things happen at the nursing home. We would hear doors open and close, things like that, things moving on their own. We had one patient who she was pretty far gone with Alzheimer's. She was almost nonverbal, but anytime she started talking about the guy in the corner of the room, we knew somebody's going to die. And it always, every time, everybody, all the staff knew that. And so when I saw the guy go in the room and that patient died, it gave it more credibility.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I have several family members and friends who are nurses who have told stories, and ironically enough, all of them work the night shift. And so they've told some very similar stories to some things that either people themselves who have just passed, or who passed away after they told them about an experience they had, or a person that they saw, or another nurse or someone in the area who ended up telling about something that they experienced, and then finding out shortly thereafter that someone had passed away. And the stories are very similar, to different things that are being seen. And that's always fascinated me. I've wanted to have someone on to kind of talk about some of the things, because I've had several nurses as well that have said, I wasn't a believer until I experienced this. I have no explanation for it.
Yeah, and the other thing, I worked in the ER as an EMT as well. I worked at Vanderbilt in trauma, doing level 1 trauma, gunshots, car wrecks, the worst type stuff.
Yeah.
And there's really when somebody passes away, there's a different energy in the room. You can't describe it unless you experience it yourself. I mean, even not with trauma patients, but with just somebody that comes in who maybe had a heart attack, and you're working on them, and it's just like it's almost like the air was sucked out of the room when they're just, the doctor calls it and they're just finally gone. It's just a weird thing to experience. And if you pay attention, I've talked to a few others that I worked with in the ER about it as well, and they were cognizant of that too. But it's just a weird thing to deal with death and dying, and to approach it that way. Like you're saying with Medics for Paranormal, their motto is working for the living and the dead.
I like that.
So,
I like
yeah.
that. I like the concept of what they're doing, and I think that it's really interesting and neat to me because you really do take the paranormal with what we do and take it to a whole different level with the trauma and the death and dying, all of that. It really does kind of make it more real and more mainstream than just sitting there talking about spirits, that from, 100 years ago or
Yeah.
whatever. It really does take it and put it on a different level, that I know a lot of people have had questions about.
Yeah, it does. It makes it very. It brings more of a human element into
Yeah.
the spirits and the death part instead of it being at arm's length on TV or something that you're
Hmm.
seeing, or even just going out and investigating. I
Yeah.
mean, to actually deal with and be responsible for trying to save somebody's life, and of course that unfortunately that doesn't always happen,
Right.
even when we do our best. But yeah, it kind of, and I think it prepared the thing I liked about Medics for Paranormal and the reason I like investigating with them is because their approach it comes from that as well.
Hmm.
And also we come from a world where you don't really get excited. Like you get, the adrenaline, but you have to do your job and you can't get overly excited or scared or any of that. So we tend, not that other investigators get scared on
Right.
investigations, but we tend to be run toward it, I guess,
Hmm.
more. And because I guess in a way we're not as afraid of death and dying
Hmm.
and the such. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
an interesting thing to think of when I was investigating as a teenager and then my 20 years working in the medical field and dealing with all that, how it changed my view and even dealing with people. So when you go into a private investigation or even a public investigation, the
Hmm.
way that you deal with people, because it's that's your number one job on an ambulance or an ER is dealing with people. And
Hmm.
so you learn how to deal with difficult people. You learn how to spot mental illness and that type of stuff. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, some of that kind of leaks over into the paranormal world,
Hmm.
especially if you're going to do private investigations, because some of these people might have a mental illness. It's not something paranormal. And they
It,
might, schizoaffective disorder where they have, hallucinations, something like that.
mhm.
So yeah, some of the skills are definitely come in handy with that aspect of investigating.
Yeah, I can definitely see where with a residential case that your your approach would, definitely, you would have training to kind of deal with that, at least in a different light than what the average paranormal investigator would have, and I could see where that would be very beneficial working on those type of cases.
Yeah, and we're also used to being chameleons in a way where we
Hmm.
have to change and adapt to different situations and different locations because you're always going into people's houses, you're going to different facilities. So we always feel, I know for me and I probably can speak for Paul and Lee too from Medics for Paranormal, that no matter if it's the first time we've been at a person's house or at a location, we're just automatically comfortable just because that's what
Yeah.
we're used to. Is going to different. You never know what the next call is going to be on the ambulance and where you're going. So you have to be okay with that kind of organized chaos and change all the time.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Paula mentioned up here, she said something about a ghost horse.
Yeah, she likes this. She likes this experience that I had. Going back, and we were going to talk about some of the locations that I've had experiences at, and going back to when I was a teenager, one of the places that we snuck into, like I said, I don't condone trespassing or any of this. Get permission. Unfortunately, Carton Plantation in Franklin, Tennessee, is not. They don't embrace the paranormal, at least yet. I hope they do at some point in time. It's been called Tennessee's most haunted house. And before I get into the stories of the stuff that happened to me there, so Carton Plantation, for everybody that doesn't know, basically the Battle of Franklin during the Civil War happened on their front lawn. And Carton Plantation was built by the McGavick family. And anybody that's familiar with Nashville has heard of McGavick Pike, McGavick High School, the McGavick name. And they were one of the founding families in Nashville. They built Carton Plantation. They named it Carton because they were Irish, and that was the name of their home in Ireland. So basically, the Civil War Battle of Franklin happened on their front lawn. And they used the house as a field hospital. And so there are still bloodstains in the floor, giant bloodstains in the floor. If you've never been there for the tour, it's amazing. I recommend going. They have an awesome museum on site. They have a graveyard where they have, I think it's like 1,200 and something soldiers buried. That the McGavick family paid someone after the battle to go around the battlefield and dig these people up and put them in one spot.
Wow.
And so there was almost 2,000 people killed during the Battle of Franklin. And they did the surgeries, the amputations, because they didn't have modern medicine like we do now. So most of it was amputations. If you got shot in the arm or leg, something like that, they would just cut it off because they didn't know what else to do. So one of the stories that they tell at Carnton, they did all the surgeries on the second floor, and they would just throw the body parts out the window. And there are reports in soldiers' diaries that the body parts stacked up to the second story window.
Wow.
Because they did so many amputations. And they had wounded soldiers tucked in every nook and cranny of the house. And there was only one bedroom that the McGavick family, would not let them put wounded soldiers in their bodies because that was kind of their sanctuary. But they ripped up all of their bed linens, all of Carrie McGavick's dresses, all of Mr. McGavick's suits to make bandages and tourniquets and that type of stuff. And there were 4 or 5 generals killed, and they had their bodies laid out on the porch so that the soldiers could come by and pay their respects. And some of those generals, I think one of those generals is buried there now. But so with that being said, with the history of Carnton and these huge bloodstains are still there. It's an amazing place, amazing house. They've restored it, fully restored it. Hopefully soon open it up and do some more public investigations and kind of embrace the ghost side of it, since it is one of Tennessee's most haunted houses. I've had quite a few experiences there. When I was a teenager back in the 90s, the thing to do if you went to school in Williamson County, where I live, was to sneak onto the property at Carnton in the middle of the night to ghost hunt. And so me and my friends would go out there, and I had many, many experiences out there. One of the famous stories is that General Cleburne of the Confederate Army died on the battlefield, and his body was one of the bodies that was brought to the back porch. Well, many people have seen him pacing back and forth on the back porch, like with his hands behind his back, pacing like he's thinking. And we saw a shadow do that many times across the field. There's a field between the graveyard and the house that's about 200 yards. And we would zoom in back in the day with the old camcorder as far as it would zoom, and you could see a shadow pacing back and forth. One time we were walking around the house before they had up cameras and all that stuff like they do now, and I saw a lady pull the curtains back and poke her head in the window like she was looking out to see who was on her front lawn.
Now that's cool.
Yeah, and that's another one that I found out since over the years that's a famous ghost there as well that does that. A lot of people have seen that. There's a lady in white, kind of the classic lady in white story. The story that Paula is talking about, the horse. So one night we were done walking around the house, kind of investigating. I was walking back across this field that I said it's like 200 yards long, back to where we parked our car. And I have a couple of friends that are about 10, 20 feet behind me. And I got another friend who is probably 10, 20 feet in front of me. And we're on across this field, and the field, the hay, the grass is about knee deep. So I hear this horse galloping and whinny from my left. And my 2 friends behind me are like, "Did you hear that horse?" And I was like, yeah. Like, what, that's crazy. So we keep walking, and all of a sudden I just feel this cold wind go through me. And out the right side, me and the 2 friends behind me saw the grass move in a straight line as we heard the horse gallop away. And so a lot of that was a crazy experience to have like the ghost horse run through me. And my 2 friends behind me saw it, the whole thing, and was like, are you okay? You just had a ghost run through you. But there's lots of reports of that out there, hearing, and I've heard cannon fire out there in the middle of the night. Now this is in the middle of a modern town now.
Right.
So there's no reason to hear horses and cannon and gunfire and people yelling. I've heard what sounds like people singing, like gospel music, like Negro spiritual type music. They still have one of the slave houses, one of the servant houses there. And there's still a couple of shacks. Used to be a couple of the shacks that were still there as well. But very interesting place. Lots of people have lots of people have reported sounds of battle and cannon fire and that type of stuff. I've experienced that quite a few times up there.
And that's cool, because you're the only other person that I know of that's experienced had a horse experience. When I was a member of a team, we had a horse experience at Octagon Hall,
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
yeah, we were just talking. I mean, we did not see or feel the horse, but we were taking a break and we had our base camp set up outside, and we were just having a casual conversation, kind of laughing, and all of a sudden you hear this horse neigh as loud. I mean, it sounds like it's like right there in the
Yeah.
middle of us.
Yeah.
And so we didn't hear that in real time, so it wasn't disembodied, but we caught it on the EVP. And I mean, it was kind of crazy to sit there and hear that, because you know how Octagon Hall is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of the same way, just a house out in the middle of nowhere, and with a highway kind of in front of it there, and no horses around. So that's a really cool experience to talk to someone else that had the same kind of experience as that.
Yeah. And I kind of would have been more in disbelief myself if my two friends behind me hadn't seen it and kind of heard it and experienced it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got the cold breeze, but they saw the grass move in a straight line out my right
that's
side.
wild.
Yeah. Yeah. But I didn't see the grass coming at me from the left. But once the kind of cold, weird sensation went through me, yeah, it was like a horse running through me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into any other stories, I was looking to see if there were any questions, and we have. I don't want to get off topic because I know we've got a lot of different stories to tell, but
Yeah.
this question's been asked a couple times in the last
Okay.
few minutes. Joey was wondering what your thought of the paranormal in the occult and or witchcraft. What your thoughts on that is. Like I said, I know that's a whole big other topic, but
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure to address his question, because he's mentioned that a couple times, and just what are your thoughts on that?
I think from doing research and talking to other people who are way more qualified to talk about the occult and witchcraft, and I've had Michelle Belanger on my show. We talked a lot about
Mm-hmm.
witchcraft and the occult, and um, I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to the occult and witchcraft, especially when it comes to paganism and that type of stuff. Most of those, because of the TV shows you have nowadays, a lot of people go straight to like the evil, and then you have the satanic panic type stuff back in the 80s and 90s. I think that the majority of it, people have good intentions with doing occult things and doing the magic and the witchcraft and that type of stuff. And I don't think people are trying to summon demons, and I don't think that Ouija boards are anything to be shunned or stay away from. I think a lot of that stuff comes down to intentions. What is your intention?
Mm-hmm.
If you have good intentions, I think you're going to have a good outcome.
Yeah.
I think if you have bad intentions, like some people do, unfortunately, I think you could bring some negative stuff in. But I do believe in the occult and in witchcraft to a certain extent, because I believe in karma, for one, because I think what you put out in the world is what you get back. And I think that's kind of what witchcraft is all about as well, is about putting certain things out and getting certain things back.
Gotcha. And I think that's a good opportunity to say, you've had some great guests, like you said, that you've talked about that. So people they can watch your past episodes, and where you've, I guess, dove into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, like I said, the episode I did with Michelle Belanger, people might know her from Paranormal State. She's a psychic. Probably one of the handful of psychics I believe is the real deal. She was on Paranormal State. She's also been on Kindred Spirits here lately in the past couple of years. But if you see a picture of her, you will recognize her from TV. I talked to her about she just had a book come out called The Dictionary of Demons. We talked about that and talked about she identifies as a vampire, psychic vampire. And we talked about the distinction between that and empaths and that type of stuff. And we talked about witchcraft and the occult and a lot of the stuff I was just saying about, how a lot of people think that it's all demonic and it's all evil when it's really not. And it comes down to a lot to intention.
I agree. Yeah. And like I said, we can have a whole show on that. But I wanted to make sure to ask that question since Eric had brought that
Yeah.
up.
And
Or
also
excuse me, since
anybody that
Joey
wants to
brought that up.
listen to the podcast, it's available anywhere you can find music or podcast. And also I need to update the YouTube, but you can go on YouTube. I don't have video, but I have the audio up there with pictures.
Yeah,
So,
and I definitely recommend it. I know
thank you.
I've got an episode coming out on a few weeks, and
Yeah.
I know that Dr. Sumner was just recently on your show, and so you've had a lot of really great guests as far as a lot of folks who have been on television, and a lot of people who are knowledgeable in the field. So definitely, I would go and Joey, check that out and look into that a little bit further. But getting back to what we were talking about, some of the different stories and stuff. So you're located in Middle Tennessee, and
Yes.
Are there any other locations that are kind of special to you that you've had some interesting experiences about, or that you like to share?
I was a guest investigator last year at Lote's house in Franklin, and they're more downtown Franklin. They were part of the battlefield area as well. That's a really interesting house. They just opened last year because of coronavirus. They had because all their money comes from people coming through and doing tours.
Mm-hmm.
And so with tourism kind of in the tank because of Corona, they opened it up to do paranormal investigations. And some people might have seen, if you watch Haunted Live with the Tennessee Ray Chasers, they did an episode at Lote's house. So some people might be familiar with that. But that's a very interesting location as well. There are a few bloodstains there. There's no problem. I'll answer any other questions when we have time. It was awesome to have you too, Chris. But there's still in the gift shop, there's still a burn hole from a cannonball that came through the roof.
Wow.
The house was almost destroyed. And the house was built by a German woodworker, and he worked for 20 years to become a master woodworker. So when you go in this beautiful house, you look at the stairway and the banister, and it's all hand carved, and this amazing stuff that it would be hard for us to do nowadays with machines to get this beautiful wood stuff. And his family, like I said, he was German, and his family was just kind of thrown in the middle of this battle. And they actually went and hid at another nearby house that's famous for the Battle of Franklin, the Carter House, which still has bullet holes in the brick outside.
Wow.
And they said that there were so many bodies on the battlefield that they basically walked from the Carter House, which is about probably 100 or 200 yards from their house, back to their house, and their feet never touched the ground.
Wow. That's a lot of bodies.
Yeah. And in the Lote's house, we had lots of different things happen. I'm not a big proponent of ITCs or spirit boxes, that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm just a little more, I'm a skeptical believer is what I call myself. Mm-hmm. So I like a little more hard evidence. No offense to anybody that uses a spirit box. At Lote's house, it made me a little more of a believer. We had a lot of responses at the Lote's house with a spirit box. One of them was every time, and this happened 3 times that night, every time we would ask who the president was, we got Lincoln coming through.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
Excuse me. And I had a interesting exchange back and forth. I was in another room, and I come back in the room where the spirit box was, and I asked, "What's your name?" Because we had this voice coming through, and it sounded like the same voice over and over, which is almost impossible with the ITC or spirit box because it's cycling through. And so to hear the same kind of tone and same kind of voices is odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it said Eric, which is my name. And I was like, that's my name. What's your name? And it said Eric again. And I said, all right, so I guess your name's Eric. And it said Eric again. So I think it was kind of messing with me. Whatever was coming through was kind of messing with me. We had some REM pod activity there. Yeah, that house was just in the middle of the battle where almost 2,000 people died in a 5-hour period. At the Battle of Franklin was in a 5-hour period that almost 2,000 soldiers died. And even there's a mechanic next door, because this is right on a strip of businesses, the Lote's house is, and they even report having activity in their garage with tools moving and disappearing and all this other interesting stuff. Yeah, and I went outside with a friend of mine that was with me to just take some pictures, and because they've got some reports of if you take pictures of the windows upstairs that you might get faces, that type of stuff. So we come back in, and my buddy Alan was like, "Were y'all beating on the wall from the outside?" And I was like, no, no. And they were in the gift shop where the big cannonball holes are. And he's like, it sounded like somebody was beating with their fist on the outside of the house. And I'm like, well, we didn't hear that on the outside. And then my friend that was with me actually saw a full body apparition. And he looked across the hallway into this other room and saw a lady behind the bed. And I immediately walked over there, and there was nobody in there. But he saw her plain as day. So that's another interesting spot. They've kind of embraced, like I said, the paranormal stuff and let paranormal teams come in. Interesting space there. I've been to Octagon, which is an interesting place. You've been to Octagon.
Yeah.
We heard cows mooing, and we were told before the investigation that there are no cows around there.
Right.
And we heard cows a lot that night, which is interesting because they're like, it's all corn farms. There's no cows.
Yeah. And because didn't the Union soldiers kill one of their cows or kill their pet cow?
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, that's one of the stories. And they threw the carcass down the well to poison the well.
Yeah,
because the owner that built Octagon Hall was a Confederate sympathizer, and the Union just kind of come through and just burned all the furniture and everything. So there's only a few pieces in there that are even original to that house.
Yeah, we had a really cool experience there in Octagon Hall, where up in the hospital area, just myself and another female was in the entire building at that time. And so we decided we were going to kind of sit down, do sort of like a prayer, and we started playing Amazing Grace. And we actually caught this woman humming and singing along in a couple sections of Amazing Grace. Wow. It was pretty wild. Yeah. And then at the end, after we had played it and we sat there for a few minutes, we got this male's voice that came over, and he kind of whispered, "Amen." And it was just a very cool experience at that location. I love the locations that are influenced by the Civil War, and battles and stuff like that. So, so I kind of categorize all of those: Lotes House, the Plantation, the Octagon Hall, kind of all of those together. And they're kind of in that similar area as well. I mean, of course, Octagon Hall's in Kentucky, but
right, Franklin, Kentucky, and then the other two are in Franklin, Tennessee. So. Yeah, but still, there's not that whole, not that much difference between the two. And it was kind of all within the Civil War. It was kind of all the same campaign from the Confederates and the Union. So, if I know my history correctly, they kind of marched up from like Spring Hill. They even had a battle of Spring Hill with Rippavilla out there. So there's lots of activity that goes on in Rippavilla and Spring Hill as well. They used to do events. They just got new owners. I don't know if they still do paranormal events, but they marched up from there, from the South, and kind of came through Franklin, and then Nashville was already occupied, and then they kind of went up towards Franklin, Kentucky. But there was also the Nashville-Louisville highway that we call it the highway now, but it was like a wagon trail that went up through that area as well, through White House, Tennessee, from Nashville up through White House, Tennessee, and kind of through Franklin, Kentucky, and then on up to Louisville. And that was kind of how they got between the two big cities back then.
Gotcha. It was Stones River right around that time as well, or
Stones River, I believe, was before the Battle of Franklin.
Okay, because it would appear they probably came
through Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, and then on up
Gotcha.
Through County and Spring Hill.
We've got another question from Debbie. She says, ghost activity at my place of employment on Monday during the day. Was wondering why a lot of investigators seem to mostly investigate at night. Which does your guest prefer?
I think paranormal activity can happen anytime. My house is haunted, and I think I'm pretty sure it's somebody I brought home from Carton Plantation a long time ago. They kind of followed me home. I prefer to investigate at night, and I think one of the reasons that most investigators prefer to investigate at night is because your senses are heightened. When you're in the dark and you don't have that visual stimulus, then your hearing is better. And then also, once your eyes get adjusted to the dark, I think the human eye can see a candle flame up to a mile away in the dark. And that's how sharp, and we don't have night vision, but any available light our eyes take in is kind of amplified. So I just think your senses are heightened. And then also the equipment that we use, you seem to catch more with the the infrared and the night vision cameras than you might during
Mhm.
the day. And a lot more
Mhm.
activity, I think, is reported at night too when it comes to people's security cameras and that type stuff, because the
Mhm.
building's kind of settled down. I don't know if I necessarily, a lot of people talk about witching hour at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you get into, okay, well, if you, so my 3 o'clock in the morning, cause I'm in the central time zone, and like Miranda, you're in Eastern time
Eastern.
zone. So when is the witching hour? So for me, is it 3 o'clock or you? There's an hour difference there. So I don't know. I don't know about the witching hour. I've never noticed at 3 o'clock in the morning wherever I'm at any more activity or any less. Um, but I think it has a lot to do with just your senses are heightened, and the equipment, as far as like infrared cameras and full spectrum cameras, they just work better at night.
Well, and it's also quieter too,
Right.
as far
Right.
as I know. Octagon Hall has, the sounds of all the traffic during the day, and a
Yeah.
lot of places I've investigated have been in downtown areas that it's just. I like investigating during the day, but it's just harder, at sometimes because the sounds and stuff. Well, you have too much noise contamination as well.
Yeah. And also with your cameras during the day, you have, with the sun being out, you have so many light anomalies that you can get with lens flares and other things. And also taking pictures. It makes it easier to do it at night.
Yeah, and I think that's why most people do. I mean, um, for
Yeah. And like
myself,
Chris is saying, business
yeah,
hours are normally, yeah,
yeah,
investigate after they close too.
yeah, and it's one of those things. I mean, you get reports all the time of activity, and I know
Yeah.
sometimes, I was in Brushy Mountain during the night and during the day as well, and the activity during the day seemed to be more residual type activity. So I think that there are certain things that do happen during the day, to Dee's point, where she was getting activity during the day,
Yeah.
but it's just most people investigate at night for those reasons that Eric mentioned, as well as Dr. Sumner.
And also, like at your place of employment, if you're having stuff happen during the day, if it's residual and it was somebody who worked there previously, then the residual energy is going to happen probably at the same time of day that they would have been at
Yes.
work, because it's just an imprint. And if it's intelligent, then they might be, because there's nobody there at night, so they might be wanting to interact with you during the day, because there's people there.
Exactly. Exactly. You were also telling me a story when we talked last. It was kind of cryptid in nature. Um, I forget what it was called. The white.
Oh, the White Bluff Screamer.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, so there's an interesting story in White Bluff, Tennessee, and it is called the White Bluff Screamer. I know from growing up around here, White Bluff is about 15 minutes from me, and I know it from growing up around here, and it's a couple of different legends. You have people who report what looks like a white Sasquatch, white Bigfoot, and they call that the White Bluff Screamer. And then you have some people that report an actual like lady in white apparition. And the story with the lady in white is that if you pass her with your car and don't stop, I guess, to give her a ride, that she will chase after your car screaming. And I know people who personally have seen this white apparition, didn't have her scream at her or chase their car, but they've seen this on a back road late at night in White Bluff. Um, it People also get it mixed up with Werewolf Springs, which is actually in Montgomery Bell State Park, and it's got the nickname of Werewolf Springs because the folklore is that the Hall family who settled in that area and built their cabin, the folklore goes that the father, they kept hearing screaming out in the woods, and it was kind of terrorizing him and the wife and the couple of children. So he goes out with a shotgun one night to try to find this beast that's terrorizing them. When he comes back, his entire family's been slaughtered by this and have big scratches and bite marks, and so it got nicknamed Werewolf Springs. And in real history, there was a circus train that crashed back in the early 1900s in that area, derailed, and they believe that some alpacas or llamas, one of the other white, got out, and they can kind of make a screaming noise,
Mm-hmm.
and they're white and furry. So they think that a lot of the stories came from that. As far as the woman in white, I don't know. You got a lot of those stories around the world. There's a lot of those in England with castles and stuff. You have the resident gray lady or woman in white type apparitions. Those are kind of famous, even all over the United States. Like I said, at Carton Plantation, there's a woman in white. That is. And as far as the screaming goes, if you're not familiar with living in the country or in the woods, you probably don't know these sounds. But foxes and bobcats sound like a woman screaming for help when they're in mating season about this time of year. And it is blood curdling. It will give you goosebumps. It'll raise a hair on your arms if you're in the woods or near the woods when it happens. It sounds like somebody's being murdered and screaming for their life. So it's just interesting. I found it interesting that it's an amalgamation of all these different folklore and stories with a little bit of history thrown in. And I didn't realize as widespread as it was until I had the cryptozoologist Ken Gerhardt on my show. And a lot of people he wears a cowboy hat. You've probably seen him on Monsters and Mysteries, some of those shows on the History Channel. And when I was going to have him on my show, I got sent a copy of his book, and he had the story of the White Bluff Screamer in there. And the version that he heard was the big, hairy, white Sasquatch that these people had seen at a local creek. And so then I talked to another gentleman who wrote the Nashville Haunted Handbook. That's what it was. And his story in there was about the white llama alpaca running around.
Well, that's interesting. You were able to tie it into an actual historical event that happened.
Circus train. And there's another story that when the circus train derailed, that the wolfman of the freak show of the circus got loose and killed some kids. And so it sounds to me like the Haints and Booger stories that were told in the Appalachian Mountains, kind of that folklore is what it all comes down to. But I do know people the women that saw the white Bigfoot Sasquatch, they really saw that. They reported that these are real people. This is not something that's folklore. And then, like I said, I know some people who've seen the lady in white on some of the back roads in White Bluff. So a couple of different phenomenon going on there. But I think over the years, this kind of got all mashed up, all this different stuff. But it's a very interesting story. And it kind of dived down that rabbit hole of what's real and what's not. And but people, they claim that the lady in white screams at them, and that's what they know is the White Bluff Screamer. So it just depends on, I guess, what avenue you're coming at it from.
And that's what I love about those type of stories too, because we have so many of them here in Tennessee, especially here in East Tennessee, and it sounds like they're in Middle Tennessee where you're at. A lot of them that kind of combine that cryptid creature along with a historical narrative or a historical event that happened. We've got a lady on here. Let's see. I saw this question kind of float by a minute ago. Nancy, let's see. She said, do you know of any investigations in South Wayne County?
I do. So I've been researching for a book that I'm going to write, that I'm writing, not going to write, but I've been researching for a book that I'm writing called Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee. I have looked into Wayne County. Right off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly what I found because I don't remember, because I've been going through so many small towns and finding out what legends and what stories I can actually get enough research to write in the book. But there is some stuff in Wayne County. And I actually run a Facebook group called Tennessee Hauntings, and we only allow Tennessee stuff in there. I know there's some other groups that allow whatever. And they could do that. It's their page. But we started Tennessee Hauntings, and if y'all want to go join it on Facebook, it's a Facebook group. We put a lot. Me and Alan Searcy, who is a paranormal author, he's written a book on Gallatin, Haunted Gallatin, Haunted Murfreesboro. He does a podcast called Southern Ghost Stories, and he's working on a couple other local books, and he's also written a book on haunted hotels and stuff around the South. And very cool. Me and him run the page, and we do a lot of that stuff. And a lot of times people will ask the reason I mention that, because a lot of times people will ask questions like that, and we'll have other people who are from there will answer, because we have almost 7,000 members in there all over. Most of them are from all over Tennessee.
And that's what I'm always telling people is that, you don't have to go to these big commercial locations. I mean, there's stories all over the map of, things. And I mean, I would guarantee that just about every county in Tennessee has some kind of local story or a local haunt that people in that area or in that region know about. So any more info you can give us on your book? Is it all of Tennessee? Is it Middle Tennessee?
It's going to be all of Tennessee. It will be in 3 sections. I will start off with West Tennessee, and then that'll be the first section. And then another section will be Middle Tennessee, and then East Tennessee. And so I'm staying away from the bigger cities and the bigger, more well-known stuff. Even though, like, I'm going to stay away from, like, the Bell Witch. The Bell Witch has been written about. You can go look at documentaries and books and movies for days, because everybody knows that. But I'm looking for the history and the stories of places people don't know, unless you're local. Yeah. So that people all over Tennessee, because I'll get asked all the time with doing the Tennessee Hauntings page. I get people asking all the time, do you know, I just got asked earlier, a lady asked, what about hauntings in Gatlinburg? Because she's from Tennessee, but she's going, like, people go out and she's going to rent a cabin and she wants to check out some of the places. So I gave her a list of a few places, out in Gatlinburg. So just kind of a guide for people, because Tennessee is extremely haunted. I mean, everywhere I've looked, there's such a long history in Tennessee as well. Being, becoming a state in 1796 and being settled long before then. So you have the Natchez Trace, which is extremely haunted. Lots of sites down through there and lots of historical figures that kind of weave in that narrative as well. But I like to jump into the history too. So with the book, you'll get a little piece of history about the location, whether it be the city or the county or the actual house or, business. And then I'll go into the hauntings of it, and also doing some legends. Like one of the legends I'm doing is Reelfoot Lake. A lot of people don't know the Native American legend of how Reelfoot Lake was created. It's a very fascinating legend about 2 tribes and forbidden love and that type stuff. And the Great Spirit didn't like it, so he stomped his foot down. But very interesting story. So I want to bring out some of those legends too, because I think it's important, and it's to keep the folklore alive as well. Yes. And that's what I try to do with my podcast. That's one reason I started the podcast, was to talk about and bring to light the history and hauntings of some of these smaller places. I have, I've had some people from TV on, and we've talked about some bigger locations, like me and you, with the episode that we recorded coming up. We talked about Brushy Mountain and some other bigger places, but we also talked about a lot of the smaller locations, and that's what I like to focus on, and like to talk about the history, because I believe the history and the paranormal go hand in hand. The paranormal is history, and it's a kind of a way that you can connect with the past and people that lived in the past. And so, that's my approach with the book and with the podcast.
Well, we're looking forward to that. Do you have kind of a roundabout time when you expect that to come out? Will it be this year?
Yeah, hopefully by the end of this year. Okay. Hopefully, I'd like to have it out around Halloween, just because it's a good time to bring paranormal stuff out. So.
Yes, so definitely people need to go check out Haunted Tennessee, the group, the Unseen Paranormal podcast.
Yeah, it's Tennessee Hauntings.
Tennessee Hauntings. Sorry, I think I just saw Haunted Tennessee.
Yeah, that's another Facebook group. But Tennessee Hauntings is one that I run and I'm an admin of.
Okay. Anything else that you have events coming up as well, don't you?
I do. Next Friday, April 9th, I have organized an event, a public ghost hunt. We'll call it the Budget Public Ghost Hunt at Rosemont in Gallatin, Tennessee. Tickets are $25. You get dinner, you get a presentation about the history and the hauntings of Rosemont, and then you get an investigation.
Very cool.
Medics for Paranormal will be there helping me out. So I'll be there. Medics for Paranormal. Alan Searcy, the paranormal author, he will be there talking about his book about Gallatin and the history of Gallatin, the hauntings of Rosemont and the hauntings of Gallatin, while dinner's going on. And we might have some surprise guests show up that everybody would like to maybe meet some people from the paranormal world. And you can find tickets on the Unseen Paranormal Podcast Lounge page or the actual show page. The Tennessee Hauntings page, we have the link up there, or you can look up Historic Rosemont on Facebook. The tickets are there as well. But they're $25 a piece. And like I said, it's next Friday, and we're just going to have a good time.
And Rosemont's another one of those places that just has such a great history and haunting as well.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it because I was talking to Eli, the historian, and I've done an episode with him and about the history of Rosemont and the hauntings, but I was talking to him earlier today, and he was telling me, he's like, because their season starts on April 1st, so it started today and runs through October, I believe. So we'll be the first ones to get in there and investigate after the spirits have all been kind of locked up for the winter and haven't had any visitors lately. So it should be a good investigation. It should get a lot of activity.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's see, have I left anything out as far as locations where people can find you, listen to the show?
I'm on all the social media,
okay.
Anywhere you can find podcast. I try to be available anywhere. Spotify,
okay.
Google, Apple, Stitcher. Yeah, all the big ones, and then a bunch of small ones as well.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and I'll get that put up in the comments here because, again, this will rebroadcast on YouTube afterwards and then also on Mix TV 104.1 on Saturday night. So yeah, unless you have any other stories or anything, I'm kind of looking here to make sure there are no other questions over here that I may have missed. Paula says, y'all come, it's going to be fun. So definitely want to check out the event that's coming up.
I mean, I could sit here and talk for the next 4 hours about paranormal experiences.
All right, y'all get comfortable now. We're
right.
Gonna settle in.
Yeah, my house is haunted as well. Like I said, I think I brought somebody home from Carton Plantation a long time ago.
One of those times you were sneaking in.
Yeah. My friends lived on the other side of town, and I had an SUV, so everybody always rode with me when I was 16, 17. Mm-hmm. And we were sneaking out there, and I took them all and dropped them all off at home, and I'm driving back across town about 4 or 5 in the morning. There's nobody on the road and by myself. And I just had that feeling, like kept looking in my rearview mirror, like somebody was sitting behind me. So I come in my house, and it's just me and my mom. My mom's in bed, and I walk down the hallway. And I grew up in the house. I know it in the dark. Didn't turn the light on. Walked down the hallway, went in my bedroom, turned the light on, getting ready to go to bed, and had my door shut. And I hear boots walk down the hallway, and they stop right in front of the door, and I could see the silhouette of what looked like 2 feet under the door. And then it sounded like it turned around and walked back down back down the way it came, and it sounded like heavy boots in the hallway. And had weird things happen in my house ever since. Used to wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning until we had I had to come to Jesus meeting with it that you're going to leave me alone because I'm trying to sleep type deal. But it felt like those old motel room beds that you put a quarter in and they'd vibrate.
Yeah.
I would wake up to that at 3 o'clock in the morning, like somebody had their hands on the bed shaking it. And that happened quite a few times. I've seen doors not only open but close right after they open at my house. Mm-hmm. I've seen shadows. Have heard my name called when I'm the only person here. All kinds of weird stuff. Knocking on the wall. So it just kind of every once in a while he makes his presence known. Hey, I'm here. I've seen him briefly a couple of times, and he looks like he's dressed in a Civil War type outfit. I don't know if it's blue or gray because those colors are kind of very similar. Yeah. And if you're just seeing it quickly, but it looks like he has a red beard, like short red beard and red hair.
Okay. Wow.
And so lots of things I've had, and I'm not the only one that experiences stuff either. I've had friends who have experienced quite a few things as well. One of my friends got spooked out one night. I used to DJ karaoke. If you work in EMS, you probably have more than one job. And so I used to DJ karaoke at the bar on the weekends. And so I was at the bar, and one of our friends was staying here, and he was on the computer kind of with his back to the door, and he thought that we had come in the house because he heard walking and somebody walking around and talking. So he calls me and he's like, "Did y'all come to the house?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, you better come get me," because it scared him. He had never experienced anything like that. But he could have sworn that we had come back to the house because of the walking and the talking, and it sounded like somebody in the other room. Yeah. So
very
just
cool.
just a I have a paranormal life.
Well, that seems to be the case. Anytime once you get involved with it, it's like it's all around you. It's always in your mind. It's, you're always
Yeah.
anything you can be involved in with it. It just seems like it just happens,
Yeah.
So
once you notice it, it notices you type deal.
yeah, and I think too, we Dr. Sumner and I have discussed this on multiple occasions about, people asking about certain types of phenomena that happens. And it's like, it really does happen all the time. And in places you wouldn't expect it. We just don't really pay attention. Everything, life is sometimes going on around and you're not necessarily looking for it, and so I don't think people listen very carefully all the time, but if you just take some time, things are happening all around us all the time.
Right. And if you pay attention, you'll see a lot more and experience a lot more. Talking about it happens everywhere. We've talked tonight about a lot of historical locations with Civil War history and other history. And one of the things I come across in my research and studies throughout the years of paranormal is Dillard's department store in Green Hills, part of Nashville, in South Nashville. There are reports of a Revolutionary War soldier that haunts the Dillards.
Wow.
This has been experienced by a Metro police officer. He claims to have chased this apparition around for an entire night. He was put there because something was wrong with their security system, and I don't know if he was on duty or not, but I know he was a Metro police officer for Nashville, and he thought somebody had broken in because the security system is, and he chased this apparition around and saw it 6 times. Wow. There is one employee who said that she heard her name called from the stock room, and she thought it was another employee. She went back there and came face to face with this Revolutionary War soldier. And the reason they think it's Revolutionary War is because he's described as having a 4-pointed hat, a white ivory billowing shirt and breeches, and he carries a musket.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah. Another employee said that she saw him just appear and push a whole rack of purses off on the floor.
Wow.
He's also seen a lot in the dressing rooms. One of the employees, he bent over, he was cleaning up the dressing rooms for the night. He bent over and saw a leg under the dressing room door where there's like a 3 or 4 inch gap, and said, sir, we're closing. You need to, go up front and make your purchases. And he didn't get a response. So he opened the door and he came face to face with this Revolutionary soldier and actually tore the door off the hinges because it scared him so bad, trying to get out of there.
Wow.
There's lots of reports of this soldier.
So was there Revolutionary War activity there in that area that you're aware of?
There were no battles ever in Nashville. But during that time, Nashville, you had Fort Nashboro, and Nashville was a settlement. So it's very possible that there were, they call him a soldier, but he could have been, it's not like he was a red coat or, he's in a ivory shirt or whatever, but, and carrying a musket. So he could have been a farmer. And that's just the way he dressed back then. But just a very, very old spirit is what they think he is. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, Nashville's been settled for a long, long time, starting with the Native Americans because of the Cumberland River. Riverfront Park was settled with Native Americans. And then you have, that's where they built Fort Nashboro and where Nashville was settled from. So it'd be within that closer proximity of Green Hills is not very far. When you take out all the interstates and that type of stuff from modern days, Green Hills that area is not really that far. So it could have been his farm, where the mall is built now.
It would be interesting to know who owned that land and kind of some background on the history of who owned it and what may have happened there. Because it could have just been his home place.
Yeah, and it just happens to be that's where Dillard is now for the Green Hills Mall. So he's not happy that Dillard's is on his homestead.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And there's, like you said, you hear a lot about. Like on the TV shows and stuff. A lot of those places, are historical places one way or another. Brushy Mountain. You've been there, like Waverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
and you don't think of somewhere like Dillard's or a mall, a modern day mall being haunted. But yeah, there's lots of stories with that location.
Yeah. There's a Target down in the Chattanooga area that's haunted by a child spirit, and I believe they've actually written about this one in several of the books. And they would have issues. I believe it's not quite in Chattanooga. It's more up on the Hickson side. I think also now it may be a Chuck E. Cheese, but at the time it was a Target.
Yeah.
And they used to have the tricycle would and bicycles and stuff would they would put them away and they would see them out. They would see them moving.
Wow.
They would also have balls and stuff that would be thrown around, and different toys and stuff that would be played with. And they've always said that this was a child spirit that haunted the old Target. Yeah, there in Hickson.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy. Yeah. Cause you go in somewhere like Dillard's or Target. I mean, even as a paranormal investigator, that's kind of the furthest thing from my mind, and I eat, sleep, and breathe the paranormal with the podcast and with investigating and all that. And I don't think going out here to Walmart, I'm thinking about who's haunting Walmart.
Right. But it's funny because different places, the Harley Davidson there in Chattanooga, they talk about all the time having activity there. And they're right next door to the old Confederate cemetery that's got 50 something unclaimed bodies that was in there. And so a lot of people don't even know it's there. It's got it's kind of got the little archway to go into the cemetery, but it's just kind of tucked back in there between a couple hotels and the Harley Davidson. And I have no doubt that's probably where some of their activity is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, hang out by yourself in the cemetery or go where the people are. And that's the closest, like you said, the way you described it, that's the closest place where people are. And they're maybe they're intrigued by the motorcycles and stuff,
that's what I was going to say. Motorcycles.
Yeah,
why
horse.
not?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, who wouldn't be intrigued by motorcycle?
Yeah.
But no, that's actually it would be a really interesting survey to talk to some of these different businesses, because when I was with the team, we did several investigations of businesses in Chattanooga, and Chattanooga is another one of those places that has the Civil War activity because of Lookout Mountain, and right there just north of Chickamauga, and so there's a ton of war activity and lots of death, but then also the Native Americans in the area. So it doesn't surprise me that some of these different locations, different businesses in there. I guess it's just what's surprising are the modern locations, like you said, Dillard's and Target.
Yeah. When I talked to Dr. Chris from Soul Sisters a while back, I posed a question to her, and she had a whole story that kind of went into this, and it reminded me. But do spirits follow structures? Like say a historical house is moved, do they follow? And she has a great, if you haven't heard it, she didn't just tell it on my podcast, she's told on others about the Ma Barker house in Florida that they got to investigate, and that house has been moved and it still has activity. But so it can be connected to the land or the structure. I think it just, if it's something intelligent, I think it's going to do whatever it wants, just like we do. I mean, I can go outside and walk around wherever I want. I can go to somebody else's house, I don't necessarily think that spirits are bound to the location necessarily. I think a lot of them like to be maybe familiar where they're comfortable, where they're familiar with, and maybe they are stuck in that place, or they just choose to be there. We don't know the rules, and there's no such thing as a paranormal expert, because you can't be an expert in something that you can't prove. I've done research for many, many years. I know a lot of stories. I've experienced lots of stuff, but I would never call myself an expert.
No. I mean, you may be an expert in photography or in certain types of technology, but there are no experts in the paranormal field. That's for sure. Let's see. Like I said, I was just definitely checking to see if there was any other questions, and I wanted to highlight this comment here from D Hoot. she's one of the ladies that follows me on my YouTube channel. And as a lot of folks know that watch, we do rebroadcast this after. So thank you, Dee, for coming on tonight and seeing this live. I've been trying to boost my likes and subs up on YouTube so that I can go live at some of the different locations rather than having to just do it on Facebook. So so thank you, Dee. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would really appreciate that. And it's under Ghost Biker Explorations on YouTube. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that as well. So yeah, unless there's anything else, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on, Eric. I know I could sit here and talk to you for 4 hours about different things, but we'll save some for the book, and we'll have to have you come back on when you get ready to release your book, or after some of these different events that you're having, to kind of share with us some of the different experiences that you've had, especially with Rosemont, after everyone's sort of coming out of quote unquote quarantine, talk to us about the type of activity that you got.
Well, and I think I'm going to come out to Athens, Tennessee, and join you in June, since it's been rescheduled. It was kind of on a tight schedule for me at the end of March here, but yeah, since it's rescheduled the first weekend in June, I think I'm going to come out and awesome. I think I'm going to. They originally asked me to speak because of my podcast and stuff, so I think I'm going to do that as well and talk about how important it is, the history and research behind paranormal investigating. So
very cool. Well, I look forward to meeting you. If I don't meet you before, I look forward to meeting you in June there in Athens.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I'd mentioned earlier, and like Eric just said, that one is going to be on June 4th and 5th. It's going to keep kind of a similar schedule to what it did with having the haunted house open, as well as doing the historical day tours during the day, and having a lot of great speakers and different paranormal investigation teams there. And we'll be talking and pushing this event as it gets a little bit closer. So we'll look forward to seeing you there.
And my episode with you will be out not next Wednesday, but Wednesday after. So 2 weeks from now. Cool. I record. I try to stay ahead on my episodes. The episode I put out yesterday is the first time I've talked about UFOs so far on my show. I was waiting on the perfect guest. Have a guy named Warren Ajus. He is awesome. He's from Malta, so he has an excellent accent, and he's plethora of knowledge on UFOs. So if anybody's interested, go look that up. I talk about any subject in the paranormal, black-eyed kids, any of that stuff, if you want to look it up. But thank you so much for having me on. I've had a blast. And like you said, we could sit here and talk for another 4 hours about paranormal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Paranormal in Tennessee. So, but yeah, definitely guys, go check out Eric's show, the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. And you said Tennessee Hauntings?
Tennessee Hauntings Facebook group. Okay. Yes.
Yes. So definitely go check those out. I'll have the different links and stuff on there. And just want to thank everyone who has come on with your questions and your comments and everything. Wanted to make sure to get to everybody. It's kind of hard sometimes when you kind of start getting off on a topic, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anyone. So a few other things that are kind of coming up. I just made an announcement today on my page about an event that's coming up in May. It's going to be on Saturday, May 15th, and it's an event that is very special to me. Near and dear to my heart. It's going to be a motorcycle ride, but or a motorcycle event, but all vehicles are welcome. It is going to be the first annual Harold Young Memorial Scholarship dart run, which is named in honor of my dad, who passed away in November of 2019. Both of my parents were educators. My dad, in the field of science for 39 years. And so he was also a 50-plus year Mason with the lodge in Robbins, Tennessee. And so I'm partnering with the Widow's Sons Masonic Writing Association, and we are setting up a scholarship in my dad's name, and we're doing a dart run. We've got more information about that on the event page, but the money is going to go for a scholarship for students at Scott County High School, for anyone that's interested in a career in the science field. So, because he was a educator in chemistry, physics, and all the other sciences. So, so there's more information about that. But if you're familiar with a poker run, this is going to be a dart run. And so, like I said, motorcycles, cars, vans, load up everyone in a van and come on out. And there's going to be 3 different locations where we're going to be playing darts at each of those locations. So we have all of that information on there, and it's on the first annual Harold Young Memorial Scholarship event page, and also on the Ghost Biker page. And we'll have more about that coming up as well. So that's coming up on May 15th, and the weekend after, need to look at my calendar here. The weekend after, which will be May 22nd, we're having the 3rd annual R.M. Brooks bike event. And that's at the Historic General Store, R.M. Brooks, which is in Rugby, Tennessee. I'm going to be having a meet and greet there. We always have 100 plus bikes there. And last year we did a haunted motorcycle ride, and I'm working out the details and maybe doing a haunted motorcycle ride again this year to that bike event. That's just 2 of the events that are coming up. We've got a few here in April that I'll put that information out soon. And then also next week on the Ghost Biker Garage, I'm not sure that if I'm going to pronounce this gentleman's name right, but Jay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I'm going to have Jay on, and he's going to be talking about Sasquatch and a whole lot more. That's going to actually be the first cryptid podcast that I've ever had. So he's got some great information on this. We're going to have a great conversation. And then week after that, I'm having your friend DC O'Rourke on there.
Oh,
so,
yeah, I love him. I've had him on my show. Me and him kind of became buddies. And yeah, I love his Honolulu Yours. His podcast is great. If you like the story side of paranormal, yeah, his show is amazing. And for the 2nd month in a row, he's on the Paranormality Radio's top 25.
I saw that, and
I was on the one for last month.
Yeah, I saw that.
My show was on the one for last month. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So we've got some great things coming up, and I promise I will know how to pronounce Jay's name by next week. So anyways, it's going to be a good, fun show. And so until next Thursday night, if I don't see you guys before, I will see you back here on the live stream on the Ghost Biker Garage next week. Hope you guys have a great week.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.